A gift no one wanted. The prison ship's crash was never part of the plan. One moment the navigation systems were stable, the stars blinking calmly across the vastness of Sector E5. The next, alarms blared, fire tore through the hull, and the deep silence of space screamed as everything went wrong. When Cale Renner finally opened his eyes, his head was pounding and blood was trickling down from a cut above his brow. Smoke filled the wrecked corridor. He reached for the emergency panel, but it sparked violently at his touch. The supply vessel he'd been stationed on was beyond saving. It had drifted too close to the outer boundary of the Zavante Dominion, an alien territory, infamous for its hostility to outsiders. Now, he was alone. No sign of his crew, no escape pod, just the wreckage of twisted metal, flickering lights, and the cold silence of being captured. Cale was dragged through blinding corridors by guards whose faces were sharp and emotionless, their eyes glowing faintly violet. The Zavante were tall, ethereal beings, skin like polished obsidian, draped in armor that shimmered with embedded tech. He couldn't understand their language, but he didn't need to. He was a prisoner. That much was clear. The throne room was unlike anything Cale had seen. It felt ancient and futuristic all at once. A dome of translucent crystal arched above him, revealing twin suns burning white above a purple sky. Dozens of figures lined the chamber, all regal and distant, their clothing embroidered with constellations and silver thread. At the heart of it all sat the Zavante Emperor, tall and statuesque, with a presence like gravity, cold and absolute. This human, the Emperor spoke in accented Galactic common, violated our skies, crashed into our soil. Do you consider that harmless? A low murmur rippled through the room. Cale couldn't speak. The guards held him tightly, bruises blooming across his wrists. He is not worth a trial, the Emperor continued. Let the scourge beasts have him. Let him be a warning. There was laughter, mocking, cruel. But then, from the shadows, near the Emperor's side, came a quiet voice. Give him to me. The laughter died instantly. Heads turned. Standing there was a young Zavante woman, pale and slender, her long hair a cascade of shimmering white. Her robes were simple, worn without any royal insignia. No guards surrounded her. She stood alone, barely acknowledged. Even Cale, bruised and dazed, could see it. She was different from the rest. The Emperor narrowed his eyes. His tone was venomous, condescending. You want this? She didn't lift her head. Yes, give him to me. He has no future among you. Neither do I. There was silence again. Then a cruel smirk twisted the Emperor's lips. So be it. A human for a useless daughter. Perhaps now, the barren one won't be so lonely. Mocking laughter rang again, but she didn't react. She stepped forward, her hands brushing gently against Cale's bound wrists. Come, she said softly. He stumbled as the guards let go, barely able to stand. He didn't understand her language perfectly, but he understood the intent behind her voice. It wasn't cruelty. It wasn't mockery. It was something else. Something almost human. She guided him through long, quiet hallways that wound away from the gleaming throne room. The deeper they went, the less opulent the palace became. Walls turned plain, lights dimmed. No other footsteps echoed behind them. She stopped at a small metal door and opened it with a soft hiss. Inside was a plain room, no gold, number carvings, just a bed, a table, and shelves filled with what looked like data scrolls and old tech components. You will stay here, she said quietly. Cale sat down heavily on the floor. His head was still spinning. Why did you take me? He asked. She looked at him, really looked at him, her violet eyes shimmering with fatigue and something deeper. Because I am like you, she said at last. Unwanted. Her name was Soraya, youngest daughter of the Emperor, and the only one considered. Broken. She had no power, no allies. The Zavante worshipped strength and lineage, and she had neither. Born under a forbidden star sign, unable to bear heirs, her fate had been sealed since infancy. She had spent her life in the shadowed corners of the palace, discarded, watched, ignored. The days passed slowly. Cale remained in her quiet quarters, healing from his injuries. Every morning Syria brought food, strange fruits with glowing skin, soft bread with a metallic aftertaste, and water that tasted of minerals and starlight. She never asked for gratitude, but Cale always gave it. You saved me, he told her one evening. No, she replied, looking away. I delayed the end. Cale saw it then. In her silence, in the way she never raised her voice, in the sadness. Behind her, she wasn't his captor. She was just another prisoner. He began to help her with small things, fixing broken panels, repairing damaged scroll readers. Syria, to his surprise, was a scientist, self-taught, brilliant, and utterly unsupported. She had built her own data lab hidden beneath the palace, gathering genetic research, old healing methods, theories about her condition. No one knew, no one cared, but Kale did. He wasn't just an engineer. Back on Earth, he had been part of a research team studying alien biology. Now, that knowledge returned to him in fragments, merging with her own. Late at night, they whispered under dim lights, their hands brushing over glowing screens and ancient alien tablets, their minds connected like two pieces from opposite galaxies, awkward but perfectly shaped for each other. "You see this?" she asked one night, showing him a strand of her DNA. Kale frowned. "There's something wrong with this segment." She nodded. "They say I'm cursed. I say I was locked." He stared at her. "Locked?" Syria looked at him, and for the first time, her voice trembled. "I think someone did this to me, on purpose." And for the first time, Kale Renner realized that the girl they gave him as a joke might be the key to something much, much greater. Beneath the skin of stars, the sun above the Zavante capital had turned pale blue, a color Kale had learned signified mid-cycle in their twin-star orbit. It had been 6 days since his crash, an unexpected gifting. 6 days since Syria, the discarded daughter of an emperor, took him in not as a servant, not as a pet, but as something in between a guest and a secret. They hadn't spoken much about what the emperor had said about her being barren. Kale hadn't asked, but the silence around the subject was heavy, almost sacred, like a locked door neither of them wanted to force open. Still, their connection had grown. It wasn't romantic, not yet, but something pulsed between their mutual recognition. He wasn't her savior. She wasn't his captor. They were both misplaced. It was during the 7th evening, after a quiet meal of glowing fruit and spiced root stew, that Syria stood suddenly and motioned for him to follow. "No guards," she whispered. "No eyes." Now Kale didn't hesitate. The palace corridors at night were cold and silent. Strange hovering lanterns floated above the halls, casting soft blue light against stone carvings etched with the history of the Zavant. Scenes of battles, ancient gods, and endless bloodlines told stories Kale couldn't begin to understand. She led him down a spiral stairway, far below the inner palace, so deep the walls changed from polished white crystal to rough stone veins and glowing circuitry. Finally, a pressure-sealed door hissed open, revealing a large chamber that took Kale's breath away. It was a lab, but not just any lab. It was cobbled together from scavenged parts, pieces of Zavante medical tech, human diagnostic tools, and even artifacts he couldn't name. The air shimmered with interactive holograms and projection fields. Data floated in the air like mist. Syria touched a console, and a 3D model of her genome appeared mid-air. It rotated slowly, glimmering like stardust. "I studied myself for years," she said quietly. "No one else would. They said I was flawed, that I was a cosmic mistake." Kale stepped closer. "What's this segment here?" he asked, pointing to a locked spiral within her genome's second quadrant. Syria blinked. "You see it too. It's synthetic," he muttered. "It's not part of your natural sequence. Someone inserted this. It's a suppression lock." She nodded. "It prevents gestation. My body can initiate life, but not sustain it. That lock ensures it never completes." Kale swallowed. The implications were enormous. "You weren't born barren," he whispered. "You were made that way." Syria lowered her gaze. "By decree. A royal child born under the star of Ka, the bringer of collapse." The priests whispered I would end the royal line, so they ended mine first. The room seemed to dim at her words. Not even the artificial lights could soften the weight of that truth. "You've tried to reverse it?" Kale asked. She said, "Every year, every attempt, nothing worked. But ... She hesitated, then walked over to a small workbench. Upon it sat a metal cylinder filled with nanobots. Advanced biotech Ko recognized from human regenerative medicine. "I've modified these," she said. "Half-human code. Your tech, your knowledge, it's given me ideas I never considered." Kale exhaled slowly. "You're saying I might be the variable that completes the equation?" Soraya nodded. "I think, together we could disable the lock." Kale stared at her. "But why me? Why did you ask for me that day in the throne room?" She hesitated. "Because everyone else sees humans as crude, inferior. But I've read your science, studied your breakthroughs. Humanity bends nature to its will. You adapt, you survive. I thought if anyone could help me change my fate, it would be you." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Kale stepped forward. "We try. Together," she smiled faintly. "Tomorrow, when the moons align, that's when Zavante energy fields are weakest. It may help the unlock process." They worked late into the night, Kale adjusted the nanobot's parameters, while Saria calibrated the infusion chamber. Their hands often touched accidental at first, then not so much. It wasn't love, not yet, but it was something just as dangerous. Trust. Far above them, in the high chambers of the palace, danger stirred. Another Zavante watched from behind shadowed curtains. Prince Vasca, Siria's half-brother, ruthless, proud, and fiercely protective. Of blood purity, he'd overheard whispers, seen surveillance traces, and he knew something was happening in the depths of the palace. She conspires with the human, he hissed to his informants. She seeks to awaken the curse. She cannot, replied a servant. She is incapable. She is no longer alone, Vasca snapped. And that makes her dangerous. The next day passed in a blur. Siria barely slept. Kale's heart raced every time he looked at the injector. The chamber had been set, the energy field calibrated. The nanobots awaited the trigger. As twin moons crested over the distant mountains, casting silver light through the vented ceiling, Siria stood before Kale in a simple robe. I am afraid, she whispered. Kale nodded. So am I then. He held the injector, one way or another. This changes everything. She closed her eyes. Then do it. The injector hissed. Blue light spread beneath her skin. Her body arched, and for a moment she screamed a cry, filled not with pain, but something ancient, something primal. The light grew brighter. Her skin glowed from within. Then darkness swallowed her. Kale caught her before she fell. When her eyes opened an hour later, they were different, sharper, brighter, alive. I feel. Double quotes, she whispered, whole, but far above them, behind a lattice of security cameras and wiretaps. Prince Vasca saw it all. She succeeded, he growled. He turned to his guards. Ready the blades. If she truly carries life, we strike before the Empire falls. The bloodline rebellion the night after the injection passed in a quiet unease. Saria remained in the medical chamber for hours while Kale monitored her vitals. Her breathing steadied. Her pulse returned to normal. But something deeper, more profound, had changed. Something no scanner could explain. She sat on the edge of the diagnostic bed, staring at her hands. Her fingers trembled slightly, as if sensing new energy coursing beneath the skin. Kale stood nearby, still overwhelmed by what they'd just done. He knew, without a doubt, that history had pivoted in this moment. It's gone, she said softly. The suppression matrix, it's no longer interfering. Kale stepped closer. Then it worked. She looked up at him, her violet eyes, clearer than he had ever seen them. It worked. But outside their hidden sanctuary, silence was no longer an ally. Prince Vasca's command had already reached the royal guards specifically, those sworn not to the emperor but to tradition, to bloodline purity, to control. Kale didn't know it yet, but in that moment, he and Saria had become enemies of the throne. 2 floors above, in a candlelit chamber wrapped in vines and floating crystals, the imperial matriarch met with Vasca. She was older than even the emperor, her skin lined with pale gold tattoos of prophecy. Her voice, when she spoke, was little more than a whisper of wind. She broke the seal. She asked. She did, Vasca replied. With help from the human. The matriarch's expression didn't change. Then the curse is broken. There was no curse, he spat. Only weakness, and now she wants to breed that weakness into the throne. The matriarch studied him with eyes like ancient storms. You fear the child. I fear a hybrid ruling us. I fear change. She would pollute the bloodline, undo centuries of power. The matriarch leaned forward. Or perhaps she will purify it. You see corruption, I see evolution. Vasca turned away in disgust. Then you are old, and blind. He stormed from the chamber without waiting for her blessing. The decision had been made. The assassin unit, known as the Pale Fang, silent, merciless, loyal only to the blood oath, would strike before the next dusk. Back in the hidden lab, Kale was packing supplies. He didn't know how long they could stay hidden. He only knew they had to leave soon. The palace was too quiet. Saria had noticed it too. She stood at the edge of the projection field, watching her DNA rotate in the air. My entire life, she murmured, they told me I was cursed, broken, that I would never carry life, and now ... my blood is alive again. Kale approached slowly. How do you feel? I feel dangerous, he chuckled, but her face remained solemn. You don't understand what this means, she continued. To them my infertility was their leash. My silence was their assurance that I would never matter. But if I can carry a child, if I am fertile, then I am no longer a ghost in their court. I become a threat. Kale nodded. Which means they'll come for you. Or us, she corrected. A soft chime echoed through the chamber, an alarm Kale had installed only a day ago. A perimeter breach. Motion detected near the outer stairs. They're here, he said, reaching for the small plasma arc tool he'd retrofitted into a crude weapon. Saria's eyes narrowed. Then we faced them. The attack came swift and silent. The pale fangs were ghosts in the corridor's 3 masked figures, armed with vibration daggers and stealth armor. Their movement didn't trigger the usual palace defenses. They were sanctioned, internal, invisible to security. The first one struck at the lab entrance. Kale turned just in time to deflect a blade with the arc tool. Sparks danced as metal met. Energy, he shouted. Saria, behind you. She whirled, her hands crackling with energy, a sudden, instinctive surge from deep within. A pulse of violet light exploded from her fingers, knocking the second assassin back. He hit the wall with enough force to crack stone. Even Saria stared at her own hands in disbelief. I didn't mean to. Kale swung the arc tool in a wide arc, forcing the third assassin to retreat. Don't apologize for surviving. The remaining pale fang adjusted his blade, circling Siraja. You were not meant to be, he hissed in ancient Savantia. Were an error corrected once. Now we restore the order. Saraya raised her hand again, but her energy flickered weakly. She had overextended herself. Kale stepped between them. You'll have to go through me. The assassin lunged, and they collided. Kale was no warrior, but he fought like someone with nothing left to lose. The blade grazed his side. Pain flared, but he stayed upright, twisting the arc tool until it burned through the assassin's wrist. With a howl, the attacker collapsed. The fight ended. 3 bodies lay still. Kale leaned against the wall, panting, blood trickling down his arm. You're hurt, Syria whispered, rushing to him. I've had worse first dates, he muttered, wincing, but her hands glowed again, and this time, the energy didn't lash out, it softened, focused. When she touched his wound, warmth spread beneath the skin, not just heat, something biological. Healing, he looked at her in wonder. You're changing, Syria nodded. We both are. Later that night they found a place to hide in an abandoned archive wing beneath the palace. Dusty, untouched for decades. Scrolls of forgotten laws and disavowed prophecies littered the shelves. There, between silence and danger, Kale placed a hand gently on her stomach. Do you think it's already begun? She covered his hand with hers. I think our child already knows it's not alone. Far above them, the court was stirring. Rumors spread faster than the twin moons could cycle. The Emperor had heard nothing official, but he felt the shift. His court whispered when he entered. His guards avoided his gaze. And worst of all, his daughter had vanished. In the reflection of his obsidian mirror, the Emperor saw what he had always feared, legacy slipping from his grasp. The era of shadows and light, the palace halls were no longer filled with the quiet, cold dignity that had once defined them. Whispers hung in the air like smoke, carried by servants, guards, and nobles alike. No one said the words aloud. Everyone knew Seria was missing, and the human was with her. In the highest chamber of the central spire, Emperor Thelen stood alone before a sacred flame. His face, once revered and untouchable, now showed lines of age, of worry, of something that looked dangerously close to fear. He watched the flame flicker and twisted the heavy ring on his finger, a royal sigil embedded with a shard of a dead star. She was a ghost, he muttered to himself. She was nothing, but she wasn't nothing anymore. A knock at the chamber door dart without turning. He growled, enter. Prince Vasco stepped in, his black armor gleaming like liquid night, his eyes dark and proud. Father, he said, bowing slightly. The pale fangs failed. All 3 are dead. Thelon's jaw clenched. How Vasco didn't flinch. The human fought. Syria awakened abilities we didn't know she had. There's no doubt now she's evolving. The flame flared for a moment, as if reacting to his words. Thelon turned, and the child, Vasco, nodded once. It's real. She's pregnant. The Emperor's breath caught. The child, the cursed possibility. The prophecy no priest dared repeat. Then there is no choice, he said. Summon the Obsidian Court. Tonight we make it. Any child born of human and Savanti blood shall be declared non-existent, and Syria, his eyes turned to steel, shall be erased from the bloodline. But even as they planned her erasure, Syria and Kale were planning their escape. In the forgotten archive below the palace, they had found more than shelter. They had found answers. Ancient scrolls, long sealed away by decree, told stories of starborn unions, of past attempts to bridge species. Most had failed. One had succeeded. A child born of 2 bloodlines had been prophesied to bring balance to the Savanti throne, to dissolve the ancient caste system and usher in a new era. The high priests had labeled it heresy. The records were burned, but not all had been destroyed. Kale sat cross-legged on the floor, scanning the scrolls with a modified translation device. "This part," he said, pointing to a glowing section. "It talks about the heart-threaded one, a child of both stardust and soil. It's written in a dialect I barely understand, but the symbols are clear. It's talking about you, about us." Syria stared at the projection. Her fingers lightly traced the air, her breath uneven. "The prophecy my mother whispered to me as a child. I thought it was a lullaby, but it was this." Her hand drifted to her stomach again, unconsciously. "This child," she whispered, "is more than just a child. It's a symbol, a threat to their power, and a promise of something better." Kale stood and took her hand. "We need to leave this place. They'll find us. Then we make sure they can't." That night, Syria led him through a hidden passage that twisted up from the archives to the outer spires and used ventilation corridors carved centuries ago. They emerged on the East Wing Tower, high above the city. The wind was sharp, carrying the scent of crystal dust and ozone. Kale looked out at the alien world towers of silverbone and gold lattice gleaming beneath the twin moons. Airships drifted quietly, their lights flickering like fireflies. It was beautiful and deadly. "How far is the old shuttle yard?" Kale asked. 5 kilometers, Syria replied. "Abandoned, but one ship remains. An old diplomatic vessel undetected by most sensors. My mother used it once, before she vanished." Kale turned to her. "You trust it'll still fly?" "I trust in what's left of her." They moved swiftly through the towers, cloaked in Syria's hacked signal dampeners and Kale's tech modifications. For hours, they remained ghosts one step ahead of the eyes that sought them. But betrayal has many faces. As they reached the final descent into the shuttle yard, a figure stepped out from the shadows, dull-armored, unmistakable. "Prince Vasca going somewhere," he said, his voice like oil on fire. Kale raised his makeshift arc blade. Syria stepped forward, her hands shimmering faintly with gathered energy. "Let us go, brother," she said. Vasca sneered. "You're not my sister, you're an experiment. A flaw." He pulled his own blade sleek, dark, humming with resonant energy. "I gave you a chance to disappear quietly, but you chose to rise. Now I must put you back beneath the ground." The fight exploded without warning. Kale charged first, buying Syria time. Their blades clashed raw heat against trained precision. Kale wasn't stronger, but he was unpredictable. Every move was driven by desperation, by something Vasca couldn't understand. Love. Syria focused her power energy, building in her palms. But Vasca moved too quickly. He kicked Kale aside and rushed her. "Your child will never breathe," he roared. Then Syria screamed, not in fear, but in fury. Her hands released a blinding surge of violet light. The air trembled, stones cracked beneath her feet. Vasca was thrown backward, his armor smoking, his blade shattered. He gasped for air, crawling toward the edge of the tower. "You are death itself." "No," Syria said, stepping toward him, eyes glowing like twin stars. "I am life, and I will never kneel again." With a final pulse of her power, the structure beneath him gave way. Vasca fell into the dark. Below, alive but broken, Kale groaned as Syria rushed to his side. "I'm okay," he gasped. "I think, maybe, sort of." She pulled him to his feet. "We have to go now." They reached the old shuttle. It was dusty, outdated, but intact. Kale bypassed the lockdown in seconds. Engines roared to life. The sky split open with thunder as the ship lifted off, breaking through the veil of the city's upper defenses. For the first time in their lives, they were free, but freedom was not safety. From his chamber, Emperor Thelen watched the escape. His eyes burned with hatred. Around him, the obsidian court murmured in alarm. "She carries an heir," one priest whispered, "a child of 2 galaxies." Thelen stood. "Then we rewrite the law of gods and stars," he growled. "Find them, kill them, and erase every trace they ever lived." Between stars and rebellion, the stars stretched endlessly around the stolen vessel as it glided silently through the darkness beyond the Zavante capital. Kale sat hunched over the navigation console, patching together code with trembling fingers. Warnings blinked across the cracked screen. Fuel levels critical. Stealth integrity failing. Coordinates unstable, but he kept going. Failure wasn't an option now. Behind him, Syria stood near the observation window, her eyes fixed on the starlit canvas beyond. Her hands rested on her stomach, the weight of her unborn child grounding her even as the entire galaxy seemed to drift further into chaos. They had escaped, yes, but not without cost. Kale's ribs were bruised, his side bandaged from Vasca's blade. Syria's powers were volatile, draining, each flare of energy leaving her more hollow than before. and now they were adrift fugitives, hunted by an empire that feared what she had become. I can redirect us through the ringed nebula, Kale said. No major patrols there, and it'll give us cover from long-range scans. Syria didn't answer immediately. Her gaze remained on the stars. I never thought I'd see them like this, she whispered. Not from behind palace glass. Not free. Kale looked at her, studying the quiet determination in her expression. You okay? She nodded, but her voice was soft. I'm carrying something the world says shouldn't exist. I'm scared, but I'm not sorry. Kale stood and approached her, gently placing his hand over hers. You shouldn't be. They called you broken because they feared what you might become. But you're not broken, Syria. You're evolving. And this child, our child, is proof that they were wrong. She leaned into him, just for a moment, and allowed herself to rest. But peace was fleeting. The ship's alert system bled, jarring. Long-range signal detected. Unauthorized lock. Interceptor class. Incoming. Kale swore under his breath. They found us. Outside, through the canopy, streaks of blue light marked the arrival of a Zavante interceptor, sleek, faster, deadly, designed for one purpose, extermination. Kale dove for the console, hands flying over the controls. I'll try to lose them, through the nebula's edge, but we're slower and the stealth systems are degrading. Syria stepped forward. Can we jump? Not safely. We need a longer charge window and, if we try now, we might rip the hull in half. She stared at the screens. Then we buy time. She moved to the rear cabin, where a small weapons locker stood dusty and unused. Inside, she found a pulse rifle, heavy, outdated, but serviceable. Kale stared as she returned, armed and unflinching. You're planning to fight them? She nodded. If I must. Kale grinned grimly. You're terrifying. Good. The battle began moments later. The interceptor fired a series of warning shots, bright beams of purple fire slicing through the void. Kale jerked the ship hard, narrowly dodging a direct hit. They don't want to disable us, he muttered. They want to make sure there's nothing left. Syria strapped in beside him, bracing herself. Keep them chasing us. I have an idea. The ship rocked violently as a glancing blow scraped the rear hull. Lights flickered. The gravitational dampeners struggled to stay online. Syria rushed to the energy conduit. She pried open a panel and inserted both hands. The current hit her instantly, raw, wild. Her body lit up from within. Power surged through her veins like lightning. Kale turned, alarmed. What are you doing? I can overload the core manually, she said through gritted teeth. Just enough to blind their senses. We'll have one shot. One jump. You could burn out. Then let me burn, she growled. He cursed and turned back to the controls. 3 seconds. No more. She nodded. Do it. Kale rerouted auxiliary power, engaging the jump sequence. The coordinates were unstable. The ship trembled, moaned under the stress. And then Syria screamed. A pulse of radiant energy exploded from her body, feeding directly into the ship's drive. For an instant, the stars bent. The interceptor's targeting systems collapsed. And then, with a thunderous crack of space folding in on itself, the stolen vessel vanished into a blur of blue light. Silence returned to the stars. The interceptor drifted, blind and empty-handed. The jump had not been clean. The ship dropped from warp in the outskirts of an old orbital station forgotten by most of the galaxy, drifting like a relic of a war long past. Its outer rings were cracked. Power flickered intermittently through its broken spires, but it was intact, and it was hidden. Kale groaned as he pulled Syria from the conduit. Her body was scorched, her skin glowing faintly, but she was breathing. He carried her to the medical bench, every step agony. Come on, stay with me, he whispered. Her eyes fluttered open slowly. Did it work? Kale smiled. You lit up the stars. She managed a weak chuckle. Good. For the next few hours, he worked to stabilize her using every bit of medical knowledge he had. She healed faster than any human would have. Her cells were regenerating faster, more efficiently. Something inside her was changing. Just the baby. Her dot by the next cycle, she was able to walk again. They explored the old station together, finding a hidden control room still partially functional. Kale powered it up with a portable cell and sifted through the old logs. Look at this, he said, pointing to the faded display. This station. It was once a sanctuary. A place for political exiles, war refugees. It was protected by a collective of outer species, some human, some Zavante, some others I don't even recognize. Syria frowned. A neutral ground. Not just neutral, Kale said. Free. She stared at the dusty symbol etched into the control panel, a hand holding a star. This could be it, she whispered. a place to build something new. But they weren't alone for long. Back in the Zavante capital, the Emperor had declared a planetary lockdown. Anyone caught harboring the fugitives would be executed. But whispers had already begun to spread across the systems of the human who defied the throne. And the once broken daughter who now carried a child prophesied to rule not just an empire, but to unite what had been divided for generations. In the slums of the outer colonies, people began to chant her name. In secret chambers, rogue scientists passed around images of her DNA strand. In dark corners of noble houses, servants listened to old songs of the heart-threaded one and remembered the promise of change. Rebellion had always simmered beneath the surface. Now, it had a face. And in the quiet orbit above a dying star, Saria and Kale stood together in the shadows of a broken station, unaware that the galaxy was already choosing sides. The child the Empire feared. The station's outer ring creaked like an old beast awakening from slumber. Above the broken star it orbited. Its fractured hull reflected orange light like a scar across the void. Saria stood at one of the wide observation ports, her hand resting gently on the swell of her belly. She wasn't showing much yet, but her body felt different, heavier, charged, and more alive than she had ever known. Kale entered the room, carrying a salvaged communication pad and a steaming cup of nutrient broth. He handed her the cup first. She took it with a quiet nod. "They've started whispering your name," he said. She turned. "Where?" "Everywhere." He handed her the pad. A flickering hologram projected images of distant colonies, snippets of intercepted messages, encrypted, comes from rebel groups and exiled nobles. The same word kept repeating across systems, sometimes followed by another. "Hope they think I'm their savior," she murmured, voice barely above the hum of the ship's systems. Kale shrugged. "You broke the rules they built their universe around. That alone is enough to make you dangerous. Add the child to that, sure, something bigger than royalty now." She stared at the screen, watching rebels paint her symbol on rusted outposts. Civilians gathering in streets to hear stories of the unborn hybrid heir. "They don't know me," she said. "They will." Suddenly, the comms panel on the wall beeped. A local signal pinged the station, weak, encrypted, but intentional. Kale rushed to it. "It's not Imperial," he said after a moment. "No encryption from the throne. It's local, civilian." "Wait." He tapped a few keys, decoding. The signal voice broke through the static. "Station Connor 9, repeat. Is anyone alive in Station Connor 9? This is Captain Juno Elliott of the Freeborn Alliance. We received your energy signature. If you are friendly, respond." Kale's eyebrows lifted. "Freeborn Alliance? They're a myth." "Not anymore," Saria said, already reaching for the come. She activated the console. "This is Saria of House Thelen. I am no longer aligned with the Zavante Empire. We are not hostile." There was a pause. Then the voice returned, cautious but hopeful. "Princess Syria, you're real." "Yes," she said, "and I am not alone." Within hours, a small ship docked with the station. Not sleek like Imperial craft, but patched, painted, and alive. Its wings bore the symbol of the Freeborn Alliance, a rising star breaking its chains. From the airlock emerged Captain Juno Elliott, a human woman with weathered skin, sharp eyes, and a holstered plasma pistol on her hip. Behind her were two others, an insectoid engineer from the Telethy colonies and a humanoid pilot from the Crinary moons. Juno stared at Syria for a long moment. Then she bowed. "We've been hearing stories," she said, "about a stolen heir, about a child that might unite the stars. Didn't think we'd actually find you out here." Syria didn't speak at first. She wasn't used to reverence. Not the genuine kind. "I'm not here to start a war," she said. "No," Juno replied. "You're here to end one." They sat in the command chamber later, going over plans. The Freeborn Alliance wasn't vast, but it was loud. Made up of old military deserters, academic outcasts, diplomats, exiles, and rebels, it had formed over decades of whispered betrayals and secret losses, and now they saw Syria as the piece they'd always been missing. Kale brought up a map of the outer systems. "The Empire's reach is weakening at the fringes, especially here on the fractured moons of Carthan and the Arvox Belt. People are ready to defy the Emperor. They just need something to rally behind." Syria watched the flickering lights on the map. H1, a world that had suffered beneath her father's rule. "What if I fail?" she whispered. "You already didn't," Kale replied. "You made it this far, and you're not doing this alone." Over the next few days, the station came alive. Juno's team helped restore power to old systems. A network of allies began arriving, couriers, medics, even a few defectors from the Imperial Navy. They brought supplies, intelligence, and one more thing Soraya hadn't expected: loyalty. The child inside her had become more than just a symbol. It was a future people were willing to risk everything for. But the Empire was moving to back in the marble towers of the capital. Emperor stared at a wall of projections, surveillance footage, intercepted messages, grainy images of Syria walking through the old station halls, her stomach slightly round, her eyes calm but fierce. He turned to his generals. She is building a resistance. Burn it out. One general stepped forward. Will launch a deep-range bombardment, destroy the station and everything in it. No, Thelen said sharply. That makes her a martyr. He looked at his priest advisors. Find me a story. A way to twist her into a villain. One priest smiled darkly. Leave that to us. The next day, the Empire released its broadcast across all systems. Syria was declared a traitor, a sorceress, who used illegal biomodification to create an abomination. A false princess who consorted with a human terrorist to forge a weapon against the bloodline. Images of Kale were doctored to show him as a savage. The child was painted as a threat, a monster born of impurity. The story spread fast, and not everyone questioned it. In parts of the Empire, riots broke out. Some demanded the child's destruction. Others began hunting suspected freeborn supporters. Fear once again became the Emperor's sharpest weapon. Back on the station, Kale paced the halls, hands clenched. It's working, he said bitterly. They're poisoning the narrative. Syria sat in silence, watching the broadcast on loop. Her expression was unreadable. They're using the child, she said at last, turning my womb into a weapon of fear. Kale knelt in front of her. Then we change the story. Show them the truth. Speak to the stars, Soraya. Let them hear it from you. She looked at him, and her fear began to fade. Then help me. Let's make the stars listen. That night Soraya stepped into the station's old communication chamber, a cathedral of rusted transmitters and ancient satellites. Kale adjusted the broadcasting tech, syncing it with every open frequency in the outer systems. Ready? He asked. Syria nodded, and then her voice echoed across the stars. This is Syria of the Zavante bloodline. They call me a traitor, a heretic, a vessel for a forbidden child. But I am none of those things. I am a daughter who was silenced. A woman they said was broken. I am a life they tried to erase, but could not. My child is not a weapon. He is the future not just of Zavante, but of all species. Of peace, of unity, of something more than control. If you still believe in freedom, in truth, then hear my call, and rise with me. The broadcast ended. Silence returned, but already, across distant moons and fractured colonies, something was shifting. Flags came down. Old oaths were broken. Soldiers laid down arms. And for the first time in centuries, the Empire began to fracture. The child who would inherit the stars no longer shimmered with quiet indifference. Across the scattered edges of the galaxy, something stirred, an awakening in the souls of the forgotten, the oppressed, the fearful. They had heard her voice, Syria, not the silent, invisible daughter of an emperor, but a beacon now, crackling through every outpost, drifting into every lonely transmitter, speaking of choice, of unity, of something bigger than blood. Back aboard the sanctuary station, Syria felt the weight of that voice more than anyone. She stood on the upper deck, silhouetted against the wide window of the command tower. Beyond it, the stars rippled with color as fragments of nearby nebulae danced in the cosmic breeze. Her hand rested gently on the curve of her stomach. Life moved within, not just a child, a declaration. Kale approached quietly, holding a small bundle of data chips. He placed them on the console beside her. Over 60 new alliances in the last 30 hours, he said, half in disbelief. Not just outer colonies. Even old imperial families. They're breaking ranks. She turned to him, and the Emperor. Kale frowned. He's collapsing faster than expected. His armies still follow, but many commanders now delay orders, some openly defect. His broadcasts are turning shrill. He's afraid. Syria nodded, but her lips were tight. He's afraid, and that makes him more dangerous than ever. Kale placed a hand on her shoulder. He'll make a final move. You know that. I do, she said, and we have to be ready. They didn't have to wait long. 3 days later, the first wave of Imperial dreadnoughts appeared on long-range scanners. 7 massive ships, black as the void, weapons glowing like molten suns. At their center, the Void Crown, the Emperor's flagship, a leviathan of steel and fury. The Freeborn Alliance gathered. Fighters scrambled from hangars. Defense satellites rotated into position. Old warships, patched together with scavenged Parts and Hope emerged from the station's shadow dot in the command room. Syria stood at the center of it all, no longer just a figurehead. She gave orders with calm authority. Her voice, though soft, held command. Cale watched her, and for a moment, forgot the girl he had met in chains. This woman, she was something else entirely. Juno Elliott, leaning over the console, turned to Cale. If she survives this, she won't just lead a rebellion, she'll lead a future. Cale nodded. That's what she's been carrying all along. When the battle began, the void lit up like a festival of destruction. Imperial ships moved with cruel precision, their formation flawless, their strikes overwhelming. But the freeborn didn't fight like soldiers. They fought like survivors, unpredictable, desperate, and determined. Cale joined the engineering crew, keeping the station's power stable. Shields flickered, defense turrets roared. The station trembled under repeated bombardments, but it held. Then, the Void Crown moved. It loomed close to the station, ignoring the chaos around it. Its weapons charged 5 ultraplasma lancers capable of vaporizing a planet's surface. Inside, Emperor Thelan stood at the front of his command deck, draped in black and gold robes, his face ashen with rage. She thinks her words can rewrite fate, he snarled. Then I'll end fate. He gave the command. Across the station, the warning blared. Primary weapons locked. Impact in 60 seconds. Panic rippled. Syria didn't flinch. Open a direct line, she said. Juno hesitated. They won't listen. They will, Syria said. This ends with my voice, or not at all. The channel opened. A projection formed before the Emperor, her face, glowing with determination. Eyes fierce and full of something he had long lost. Belief. Father, she said simply. He recoiled. You are no daughter of mine. No, she agreed. I am not your shadow, not your failure. I am the future you tried to bury, and I forgive you. His mouth opened to reply, but no words came. I forgive your silence, she continued. I forgive your cruelty. Because I know now that you were afraid. You saw something in me that you could never control. And now, here, I am unbroken, unchained. He sneered. You carry an abomination. She stepped forward in the projection. I carry the union of 2 peoples. I carry hope, and your empire cannot survive it. Not because we will destroy it, but because it will evolve without you. For a long moment, Thelan stood frozen. Then, the unexpected happened. A figure behind him, a general, stepped forward and removed his command badge. I stand with her, he said that, then another, and another. Across the Void Crown, the bridge emptied. His command fractured before his eyes. He watched as ship after ship ceased fire. Power cores cooled. Cannons powered down. Cale stared in disbelief as the screen updated. Surrender protocol initiated. He's lost, Juno whispered. It's over, but not quite. In a final, desperate act, Thelan activated the Crown's self-destruct. If I cannot rule, he spat, then I will leave nothing to be ruled. The flagship's core began to spike. Detonation in under 2 minutes. Syria's voice echoed again. Not just through comms but through the station's emergency broadcast. System, evacuate the Void Crown. To the crew, to the soldiers, you are not him. You are not your orders. Save yourselves. And they did. Escape pods launched. Docking bays burst open. Thousands of lives poured from the ship, even as its core melted. Then, in a brilliant blaze of light and gravity, the Void Crown vanished in a bloom of fire and silence. It was over. Days later, the ceremony was held aboard the newly christened Unity Spira rebuilt station that now served as the freeborn capital. Delegates from dozens of species gathered in its halls. The air was charged with a cautious kind of joy, the kind that only comes after surviving something you were never meant to survive. Cale stood beside Syria as she stepped onto the stage. She wore no crown, no armor, just a white robe, patterned with both human and Xvanti symbols. Her hand held his. Her other rested on her stomach. I make no promises of perfection, she said to the galaxy. Only progress. We were told we were incompatible. That peace was impossible. That some lives mattered more than others. But I reject those truths. Because today, I carry something more powerful than blood. I carry choice. And so do all of you. The room thundered with applause. Later, in the quiet of their quarters, Syria lay beside Cale, the low hum of the station soothing in the background. Do you think they'll accept our child? She asked. Cale smiled. They already have. She looked down at her stomach. Then I hope he or she will rise in a world that never makes them choose between halves. One where they don't inherit a crown of chains. They won't, Cale whispered. They'll inherit the stars.